Our reading this morning is a poem by Norma Jean Warner called Yet They Bloom. There beside the road, the Queen Anne's lace was meant to tower and twist and turn in all its grace, showering beauty on every landscape. Flowers of white in tatted loveliness, flowers of white in regal finery. Beside it there along the road, so short and stubbed I did not recognize at first, is white sweet clover. Wild sweet clover, meant to be a feast for a sucking bee, meant to thrive and tower, sending its intricate plumes in every direction, yet it's lower than the clods above my feet. How many times has struggling leaf been cut and torn, their ever-greening heads shorn and strown along the way? Each time they've struggled to stand tall, the mower blade has sheared them off. Some roots could not withstand the fearsome slash, but those left are stunted and dwarfed and nowhere near what they were meant to be. And yet they bloom, and yet they bloom.
Illness, disease, unwellness, these things are all a part of life, something that we understand and that we can relate to. When someone we know is ill or hurt, we tell them how sorry we are. Maybe we even bring them balloons or a card, or we wish for them to get well soon. However, sometimes sickness is not so apparent. Sometimes it does not dwell in our limbs or our hearts or our lungs, but in our minds. The very part of us that makes us who we are can grow tired and broken, just like any other organ can. It is when this happens that a line becomes blurred, and something occurs that is very hard to understand from the outside. A blending of the voluntary and involuntary, normal and abnormal behavior, mundane and terrifying words and actions that are all somehow still part of the same person. This phenomenon can be truly shocking to some, and it is this that is known as mental illness. Mental illness is a subject close to my heart, my brain, more accurately. I have bipolar disorder type 1, which causes me to swing between extremes, from laying in bed immobile for days on end, to having rapid thoughts, making reckless decisions, and experiencing delusions of both grandeur and paranoia. It's an ever-changing shapeshifter, sometimes masquerading as a beautiful creature, but in the end it will always find a way to bite me. I have an anxiety disorder that eats away at me, pinning me down and preventing me from doing things that I fear and that I love in equal turn. It feels like my body is inhabited by a swarm of wasps, sometimes attacking and stinging me mercilessly, leaving me frantic and paralyzed by their fury, and other times just thrumming quietly and angrily in my veins, but never letting me forget that they're there. I'm also recovering from an eating disorder that distorts my thinking, changing the way I eat and the way I occupy and move through the space of the world. I battle every day with a skeleton whose long, painted nails claw at my stomach, pinch my lips closed, and jab at my eyes when I pass a mirror. Everyone has monsters of different shapes and sizes and menacing qualities. I'm sure I wouldn't want to face many of your monsters, just as many of you wouldn't want to meet mine. My mental illnesses are my monsters. They've consumed much of my life, enveloping it and groping it with their sticky fingers, tainting it and staining it. So many of my actions, my choices, my words are driven by my monsters. Like most people, too, I do not live alone on an island. My illnesses affect everyone that I come into contact with to some degree. The closer someone is to me, the more they fall under the dark umbrella of my disorders. My daily struggles leave a footprint on the lives of every person who chooses to be a part of my journey for however long. I know that I leave the people I love with a burden they never asked for, but it is how they have learned to carry that burden that has made the difference between life and death for me. When my bipolar was first being discovered, I spent a day waiting in an emergency room to be transferred to my first ever psychiatric unit. My dad drove 3 hours in the middle of his workday to come see me immediately. I told the nurses not to let him into my room. For hours, I cowered in fear in my hospital bed while my dad waited in the waiting room, wondering what could possibly be going wrong. Still, I refused to let him enter because I could not stand the thought of him seeing what had become of me. I was a mess, a freak, far from the perfect daughter I had always striven to be. I did not want him to see how far I had fallen. Finally, though, after an official evaluation and hours of deliberation, I pulled myself together enough that I thought I could look normal for my father. When he came in, he showed no disappointment. He was simply relieved to see me, safe and sound, and just as I was. He sat in a corner of my room in the ER for hours as I babbled on effervescently about the things and this thing and that next, and while he made important phone calls to secure me a bed in the hospital that I was headed to. I remember going on and on and on to him about my brilliant and world-changing plans to create a social justice-powered social media platform that would bring millennials together everywhere for the greater good. Thank goodness that dream died with the lithium, because I don't know the first thing about coding. But my dad sat and listened to me, and he brought me Taco Bell, and he laughed with me when things weren't too overwhelming. And because my dad was there for me that day, not doing anything special, but just being there and listening to my quite possibly insane ramblings, and eating steak quesadillas with me, I didn't feel alone and at the scariest and loneliest point in my life. Every time I've had to go to the hospital since, my family has been there with me the whole way. They've driven me there, visited at every opportunity, written me letters, and printed out pictures of my loved ones left at home to have by my bedside. A hospital is a scary, lonely place, but somehow my family has always managed to make it just that much easier to bear. They didn't achieve this through knowing just what to say or what to do, but because they showed up whenever they could, and they said whatever they could, and they heard my pain, and they did what they thought was best to ease it as much as they could. The key is that they do just what they can. They don't do what they must, what is best, or what is even necessarily right. They do what they can. For so many people with mental illness, or who are simply struggling in general, just having someone do what they can makes all the difference. It is kindness and compassion that heals, not just clever advice and savvy know-how. You do not need a psychology degree to gently ask someone who's hurting what they need from you. As a mentally ill person, I know that it is my responsibility to invite help. Unfortunately, we do not yet live in a society that can spot mental illness on the street and come running with a puppy in a blanket. It has always been a choice, a scary choice, to open up to others and tell them, I need your help with this. I cannot do it on my own. And I can imagine how truly terrifying it is to hear such a plea. How can I be of help, one must wonder. Who am I to help you on this road? And the answer, coming from someone who has asked the question many, many times, is simply, I'll be here for you. You don't have to be alone. Tell me what I can do. During my second stay at a hospital, the boy I was dating at the time came to visit me, and we had our second date over sterile hospital sheets under fluorescent lighting. My hair was an unwashed rat's nest, and my face was as bare as a baby's bottom, but he didn't care. In a time when I felt alienated and unlovable, a creature somehow separate from the real world, he showed me that I was still just a person by staring my reality in the face and walking right through it all to reach me. My date didn't know anything about my monsters. He simply came running when he heard I was in the hospital. He did not treat me like I was mentally ill. He treated me like I needed a little extra love that day. And he was exactly right. There was a job that I held soon after my diagnosis that I disclosed my illness to. When I was panicking before work, I could text my boss, and he understood that I would be in as soon as I could pull myself together. Work was difficult for me to face sometimes as I traversed the ups and downs of my new diagnoses, but knowing that I did not need to justify my struggle to anyone on my rougher days made actually showing up possible for me. I've had other jobs that did not know of my illness, jobs that I simply one day stopped showing up to because I was so overwhelmed by the idea of trying to explain what was really going on with me. Sometimes on this job that I had, I would have a panic attack while I was there, and my coworkers would help me into the back and set a fan facing me. They would find me and give me my medicine and ask what they could do. They let me curl up on the floor undisturbed, except by the occasional check-in or to ask if I needed anything. These weren't mental health professionals, just people who wanted to help. I cannot imagine what those days would have been like had I not had such understanding and generous people surrounding me. Basic understanding of the human condition is all it takes to see into another person's pain. We do not need to know the exact nature of one's suffering in order to love them and wish their way out of it. We do not need to understand why someone is upset to ask them, "Do you need me to be here with you right now?" So much of the disconnect between those with mental illness and those without is a lack of understanding, which brings about a fear of the unknown. But who has decreed that we have to understand one another in order to love one another? Do we need to have experienced a panic attack or a depressive episode ourselves to sit next to someone who's going through one and to simply offer our being, our time, our compassion as it is needed? We do not have to know much about mental illness to play some small role in the larger network of someone's support system. Say you work with someone who is having a panic attack. Ask them what they need. Maybe bring them some water. Tell them they're safe where they are. Maybe you're just starting to date someone and they've told you of their mental illness. Try perhaps not running away. See what happens if you stick around and with permission ask questions, learn things. See the person past the symptom list. And say, worst of all, a dear family member has been diagnosed as mentally ill. What are you going to do? Cut them out of the will, stop calling, maybe kick them out of house and home? No, just be there. Hold their hand if they want their hand held. Tell them they're loved. Tell them they are wanted. Tell them you are safe to open up to and safe to close your arms around, unless if that is wanted. Tell them or support them in their treatment. Give rides. Take an interest in what they're learning and working on. And encourage successes and step forward. But never let them believe that they're worth any less if they stumble. Just be there. Ask them, hear them, do what they can. When I'm at home and the wasps are singing, or the shapeshifter is playing tricks, or the skeleton tries to seal my lips, there's always someone to support me. They may have no way of understanding what exactly I'm fighting, but it is their unwavering love and the mere fact that they're there despite it all that keeps me going.
I'm Todd Underwood. I'm Savannah's dad, and I'd like to give you a reading from Furiously Happy. It's a book by one of my favorite authors, Jenny Lawson. Some people don't understand that for a lot of us, mental illness is a severe chemical imbalance rather than just having a case of the Mondays. Those same well-meaning people will tell me that I'm keeping myself from recovering because I really just need to cheer up and smile. That's when I consider chopping off their arms and then blaming them for not picking up their severed arms so they can take them to the hospital to get reattached. Just pick them up and take them to get fixed. It's not that hard, Sarah. I pick up stuff all the time. We all do. No, I'm not going to help you because you have to learn to do this for yourself. I won't always be around to help you, you know. I'm sure you could do it if you just tried. Honestly, it's like you don't even want to have arms. Playing the role of Sarah in this scenario was me prior to November of 2013. I've always felt compassion towards people who had mental health issues, but I really had no idea what it looked like until it hit our family. Since then, our youngest daughter, Delaney, has also been diagnosed with some similar issues, and we've learned a lot. From my perspective, the most difficult part of supporting our girls through their struggles is the uncertainty that comes with them. I have a constant fear that one day things will get too far out of control. Severed arms heal in a predictable fashion, but psychiatric prescriptions can take years to be refined. In the interim, it's nearly impossible to know when the words and actions of loved ones are accurate representations of their emotions, overly dramatic theater, or worst of all, masking deep despair. I can't say enough, though, how proud I am of our girls and the openness that they've exhibited. They both have kept Kathy and me closely involved in their treatment, and when things have gotten really bad, they've been brave enough to tell us that they need additional help, even if it meant trading the comforts of home for a scary treatment facility. And as scary as that decision to get admitted has been on them, those are also the hardest of times on us. I've never felt before the kind of emotional pain like letting a security door close between me and my sobbing daughter as she stared into my eyes and begged me to take her home on her first day of treatment. But with the pain has come joy and growth for our family. Stigmas have been thrown out the window and new friends have come into our lives that we never would have met otherwise. I've yet to feel that I've had the right answers to their questions or that my suggestions for next steps have any merit, but my girls always know how much I love them and that I'm trying my best to be supportive. Mental illness is not a challenge for anyone to take on alone.
I took an allergy pill, but sorry. Well, I was just leaving a religious education conference when I got the call from Todd saying he was on his way to Galesburg. Sorry. My drive home was a bit nerve-wracking, to say the least. While Todd sat at the hospital waiting to see Savannah, I was at home to take care of Delaney and the dog and to wait patiently for those occasional texts and phone calls. It was a long night. When Savannah was first diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I felt relieved. Finally, we have an answer to what all's been going on, and once she's on some medication, all will be well. But of course, it hasn't been that easy. Other diagnoses were given, for things that I was familiar with and for some that I wasn't. Quickly, we learned that finding a balance between the various medications would not be easy. It became obvious that this was going to take a while to figure out. I started to question where this came from, knowing that there is a genetic component to bipolar and ADD. And who could I point the finger at? Certainly not my family, right, Ma? But it doesn't seem that it's that simple. There aren't any obvious indicators on either side of the family, so who knows? And then the sadness and grief set in. Where did my spunky, outgoing, passionate daughter go? Sorry. Will she be able to return to college? Will she be able to find work? There were many unknowns, and still are. We are navigating our way through the sea of mental illness. The hardest part for me so far has been learning how to balance and stay upright in this sometimes turbulent sea. How to be supportive yet not enabling is a challenge. When dealing with adult children, you don't have a legal say in their treatment. Rather, you need to try and look at things from many angles, talk them over together, and help them find the best path for themselves. I'm not one to shy away from sensitive subjects, although my family may not agree at the time as I address them and try to deal with them head on. And I try to do that so they don't become a tangled mess and get escalated. And yet there are times when I need to hold back and refrain in order to accommodate Savannah's moods, energy level, and attention span. And I don't always do that gracefully. And like most of you, I still need to work, do the day-to-day tasks, and be present and supportive to our other two young adult children, Kyle and Delaney. Some days are more challenging than others. Here at UECE, I have a different balancing act to do, aside from working as your religious educator. I truly feel that I need to share my struggles, appropriately, of course. I believe that in doing so, it encourages others to open in this faith community by being genuine. Whenever asked, "How are you?" I try to be honest without being depressing, unless I'm having an awesome day. When Savannah was first hospitalized, I wrestled with whether to share it during Joys and Concerns. On one hand, I wanted to respect her privacy, and on the other hand, I wanted to be open and honest about what I was facing. In talking it over time, I realized that we needed the support of our faith community too. After the service that day, we were hugged and embraced by many of you, and it felt good. Yet because I'm a staff person, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to dump my problems on any of you, although I'm sure many of you would embrace me for that. Therefore, having connections outside of the congregation is important. It's something I need to be more intentional in doing. One more aspect of this journey is one that many of you could relate to, and that is the financial implications. We've had 6 hospital stays, dozens of medications, many therapists, psychologists, medical people treating our family in the past 3.5 years. And I can easily see how people go bankrupt in something like this or a major illness. So far, we've been blessed with family members who've been very generous and helped us out. We still struggle, but we're staying afloat. And at the end of the day, I must remind myself to be grateful for all I have. We have a home, food on the table, clothes on our backs, friends, family, and each other. And we have this beloved community.